Would it be surprising to you if the secret to becoming world-class is quitting?
Hey, listen, I quit.
The reason it is such a secret is that quitting is both the best strategy for becoming world-class and also the worst tactic, guaranteeing your misery. And knowing the difference is what sets apart the best from the average. And if you get this wrong, you're doomed to repeat an endless cycle of mediocrity. So here's a quick video on how this book has helped me to become an elite sales rep and how mastering this contrarian skill of quitting can help you to rise to be the best in your field. The reason quitting is such a contrarian skill is because it's often misunderstood. There are two different ways to quit. You can quit as a short-term strategy to escape pain and discomfort, or you can quit useless endeavors in order to focus all of your energy on the things that matter most. One is short-term, the other one is long-term thinking. One is tactical, the other one is strategic. One has been thought out well in advance, while the other is just an impulse to react to pain or to suffering. What you need to understand is that there's a lot at stake here. Becoming world-class is not easy. It can be rather simple, but it does require a tremendous amount of work and discomfort. The question is what's that discomfort for? And so if you're going to quit correctly, you need to know what's at stake in terms of what you have to gain and also what you have to lose. There's a maxim in the sales industry that number one, or the top 1%, gets paid 10 times the amount as the guy that's bringing in the top 10%. And then the number one guy is getting paid 100 times more than the guy bringing in at the top 50%. A quick illustration of this is that when I was growing up in door-to-door sales, our number one sales rep was bringing in around 1,200 accounts a summer. The mark for the top 10% at the time was about 250 accounts for the summer. And then an average sales rep was doing around 130 accounts a summer. These are massive differences on the returns for being in the top 1%, the top 10%, and then just good old average. The problem is that so many of us are willing to settle for average, and we wonder why our lives or our businesses or our careers are such a struggle. We think that being comfortable is enough. We think that that's enough to get us through all the dips and curves of life. And frankly, it's not. More often than not, a goal to just break even is going to sink a person. And it's super true in sales. That attitude is contagious. It's detrimental. It's infectious, and it can destroy you. And so the ultimate message of this book is we need to become world-class, and we need to devote all of our resources to becoming world-class in the markets and strategies that matter the most to us as individuals in our specific worlds and in our specific circumstances. And there's a couple of things that we need to keep in mind in order to be able to do that. First of all, in order to become world-class, we need to have what I call the whole car complete, or at least a minimum viable product of the car completed. Because here's the problem. If you do not have enough resources to complete a project to get it to a stage of what I call a minimum viable return, then you never get a return on the initial investment that you made in order to generate momentum. So a simple example that Seth uses of this in the book is of a bicycle tire. The first 10 pounds of air pressure in a bicycle tire do practically nothing for it. And then if you go over an additional 10 pounds of the bike's capacity, then it bursts the tire. And so there's this sweet spot of where the bicycle tire is considered full that makes the biggest difference. And a couple of pounds of pressure in either direction in that general area is what will determine the capacity and the functionality of that bicycle tire. A different example or metaphor of this would be with a car or an automobile of any kind. Every vehicle needs a few basic components in order for it to function, and then everything else on top of that is just luxury. It's just added benefit or convenience. You can see a go-kart function with just a basic motor, radiator, transmission, chassis, and tires. And of course, a seat and steering wheel. That's all a go-kart needs, but we're accustomed thinking of cars along the lines of like Toyota Corollas, and then on an even more advanced level, Rolls Royces and McLarens. There are different stages and different categories of completion that allow us to produce at certain levels. The problem is that most of the time in our efforts to become world class, we often don't have enough resources to go from zero, from nothing, from Ford Model T all the way to Rolls Royce or to Porsche. We just don't have those kinds of resources when we're starting out. And so we have to break it down into steps, and we have to be able to progress in stages, and to make sure that each time we make an investment in resources, we get those resources back as we progress from stage to stage. And one of the biggest problems in all of this is that there are too many distractions in our lives, both professionally and personally, that are keeping us from being able to devote the needed resources in order to become best in the world, in order to overcome what Seth Godin calls the dip. There is this slog between the initial excitement and actually getting sustainable results. And the number one reason that we have that slog is because we're too distracted. We're pulled in too many different directions, and we're trying to do too many different things, or we're spread too thin in order to make a meaningful impact on the things that are actually going to move the needle. And the solution to being able to do that is we have to quit the tactics that do not advance our strategy. And so you just want to understand both where you're at and what kind of resources you have access to. The problem is that we often get so distracted by this cycle that we think we need to look to other places in order to find solutions to get us through the dip. We get distracted. And that's why I've had to read this book every single summer. It's just been my annual tradition every time I need to re-up my level. And so we need to begin each new phase with a specific return on investment in mind. We need to know what the end looks like, and to make sure that we can continue this process and continue to play an infinite game. Because if we don't consider all of our available resources, what ends up happening to us is that we end up failing over and over again, and we end up quitting as a means of escaping that failure and relieving that pain. And we go start something new. And that new thing creates a new level of excitement, and that creates a nice little positive up. And then from there, we experience that valley of dip as we try to learn and try to master it. And because we're spread too thin, we get stuck there, and then we get discouraged, and then we actually end up quitting again, and we keep repeating this negative cycle. And so we need to stop, and we need to take stock of where we're currently at. How many things are we focused on at this moment? Because frankly, we probably only have the resources to grow in one or two areas while holding steady in all of the other areas that matter most to us. And we can probably only have 4, 5, maybe 6 things that are important to us in our lives. And then everything else after that, we need to quit. We need to get out of. That's why one of the biggest pieces of advice that Warren Buffett gives to new entrepreneurs and to people who are asking him for advice is to create a list of 50 goals, and then to narrow that goal list down to 20, and then to order that 20 into an order of 1 to 10, and then to rip off everything that's below number 5. We just have to get rid of these distractions, because frankly, we can't do everything. We have to focus on what matters most to us and be okay with letting go of everything else. Now, we can't get caught up in the momentary pain of quitting. That's the major problem. That's the thing that really holds people back. We have to decide what is worth suffering for and under what conditions we will quit before we begin the activity. That's called maturity. That's called thinking things through. And we need to understand what those conditions are before we even set out. That way, we can dedicate ourselves and be able to endure and push through the slog the moment it starts to get difficult. And we can just accept and settle in and remember what it is that we're pushing for. And this whole thing is counterintuitive, because so often we hear the advice that you just need to keep going, that you need to be able to just endure. And there is some truth in that. You don't want to make short-term comfort as the reason that you quit for a long-term payout. Now, it's a totally different story if there's some kind of dead end, or there's some kind of impending doom if you continue this. Like Seth Godin uses the example of smoking, right? At the end of that curve, there's a cliff called emphysema, right? Or a dead end job right? That takes you nowhere. Like you need to quit that job at Burger King in order to go on to progress in your career. But if you're in sales or in a specific relationship that actually has real potential to go somewhere and to be something and where you mean something to each other, or if you're trying to start a business or a YouTube channel or a diet or an exercise regimen, all of these things have dip curves where it's ups and downs. And you need to be able to push through those slogs in order to get to that next level. Because really becoming world class is an iterative process. We think it's a smooth linear line or a smooth exponential curve line. It's not. It's much more like an up and down roller coaster, where the downs are definitely there at each stage, but the ups take you higher as you go past each stage. And so it looks something like this. And you want to be able to maintain and hold out through these different dip curves. And the key part of being able to get through these dip curves is being able to recognize that you're in them, embrace them, and find the different strategies that will help you to lean through them, that will help you to be comfortable in them, so that way you can see the long-term benefit in payout and get yourself through that. And to be perfectly honest, I've been there. It sucks. It sucks ass. But you have to learn how to master this skill of quitting in order to become the best in your field. Seth sums up this concept of quitting the right things at the right time just like this. He says, yes, you should. You must quit a product or a feature or a design. You need to do it regularly if you're going to grow and have the resources to invest in the right businesses. But no, you mustn't quit a market or a strategy or a niche. The businesses we think of as overnight successes weren't. We just didn't notice them until they were fully baked. And that's the thing. We don't see the club soccer players, but that phase was needed. They needed to grow through that. We don't see them really all that much at college. We don't really even see them until they get into the World Cup, at least most of us, right? We don't see the professionals until they are fully baked professionals. And we have to get through those different dip curves in order to reach that level of status. And here's the thing. We all go through these dips. We all need reminders. It's why I read this book every summer. I wish I could say I was perfect at this. I wish I could say that I remembered it all the time, that this was something at the top of mind. But what I have instilled in myself is that I need to funnel my resources into a couple of key strategic efforts to move the needle with the highest capacity possible. At the end of the day, I hope these concepts have been helpful for you. If they have been, please feel free to like and subscribe. Every little bit helps for the channel. Thanks so much for watching.